As Janet said, I work for Southern Oregon Education Service District. I work with a variety of age groups, birth through 21. And I have had many years with the ESD. And so tonight's topic, navigating the teen years. Sorry here, I'm gonna go back, here we go. So I like to start with a little bit of humor. So I'm not coming down for dinner. Didn't you read my blog? I find this humorous just because our technology world today, especially today with COVID, and our kids often communicate through their computers, iPhones and text. And so it's dinner time. So instead of going down, we're going to blog about it. Every kind of slide that I've showed during this presentation this evening could be a training in itself. So I look at these trainings that we're doing virtually this spring as being more of a resource to you than a full, like, involved training in each of these topic areas, because I could spend the whole evening on healthy bodies for our adolescents. But so what I do is I offer many, many resources, and I put the website where I acquired these different materials and resources on each of these slides, which you should have access to. And so therefore you can go in and explore them further. I start with puberty and healthy bodies. This is through the Vanderbilt University because whoops, let me go back. It's important for our kids to understand what's going on in their bodies first, because if they're dysregulated due to the fact that they're having changes in their bodies and they struggle with being fearful or curious, then we can take care of those biological needs first, because we know if we take care of those sensory system and those biological needs, then kids are better able to focus and learn. So I went, if you look here, if this is the girls one, there's a girls toolkit web version, a girls toolkit appendix, and there's PDFs, and there's an online course. But what I want to show you just briefly, while this is opening up, is they have amazing free graphics and activities that you can do with your kiddos. I've used these with teachers as well to kind of coordinate the kind of languages, the kind of language that's used at home around bodies and the language that schools use. So it goes through different graphic parts of the body. It talks about first then, which most of our kids are aware of by the time they're adolescents. It has a lot of great visual cues that you can cut out and use for visual strips in your bathrooms or different places for social stories. It talks a lot about hygiene. And there's this activity is called public and private, teaching our kids that have less awareness, social awareness about what things are done in public and what are done in private. So there's actually activities. And so it goes on into some of the nuances of what's okay and what's not okay. It goes into like pre-dating type things and safety around sexuality. Again, some more social stories about public and private. And it's just an amazing resource. It goes on and on. So again, I don't want to spend the whole training just reviewing these, but they are a wonderful resource. The other thing I want to mention is that when I do these trainings, I don't know who my audience is. In fact, I can't even see you. And that's always a little bit difficult for me because there are so many, as it's called the autism spectrum, as you know, there's so many different levels of impact that autism creates that I try to keep this also very general, because some of these slides will not apply to certain families that are here attending this workshop because their kids are much more higher functioning. But hopefully you can all kind of tune into the parts that apply to you and I guess tune out for the parts that don't, because it's hard to know the levels of what all your actual children are experiencing. But I think even no matter what level, we can always review certain things with our teens, and there are things that we may think that they understand that they actually don't. So the second slide I really talk about is once we make sure our kids are understanding their body changes, they're comfortable with that. They understand safety around body images. This is understanding people in their role. I really like this program called Social Circles. And this slide explores a lot of different activities around social circles. And so it's using relationship circles to understand social boundaries. And there's a lot of free resources to download for you. I try to present during my workshops a lot of things that are free. There's so much out there, and some of it's good and some of it's not. So I kind of choose the ones that I think that are valuable. And so this has some nice downloadable relationship cards, how to create your own circles, and then some cue cards, how to use these visual aids. It's a nice program on teaching kids about what we do with different people. For instance, blue being family, those are the people we hug. And friendship, maybe we slap those kids high five during non-COVID times, of course, or sideways hugs. Acquaintances are people that we might just wave to. So we can really take this and explore a lot of different behaviors our kids have out in public and ways that we can keep them safe. So those first two slides really apply more to kids that are perhaps maybe a little bit more impacted by autism, and they need that level of support. This is a really great resource through the Interactive Autism Network. This is a research network, and now it's no longer active, but they still have a lot of great resources. And this Interactive Autism Network actually refers for families, if they're interested in being part of research, is to go to the SPARK program, in the research program, if those of you have ever heard of SPARK. It's, I know OHSU talks a lot about SPARK, and I'm sure Providence does too. So I'm going to open this up to just kind of show you what this actual internet site has as far as resources. I want to say too that if there's something that you see here tonight and you don't have the capability to print or to have access to, I know Kathy Kesey, who's hosted many of my trainings through the Swindell Center, I'm sure you can still contact her, and Swindell Center often has a way of getting maybe some of those printed materials to you. So this, within this website, there's some really nice articles about autism in the teen years, what to expect and how to help. This is a really great article. And we're not going to go through the article again verbatim because they have lots of resource articles on their website, but I just want to kind of familiarize with you. It talks about the growing number of teens. It tells personal stories. And I'm going to just keep scrolling through so you can just kind of see this and get an idea. After it talks about what is autism, it goes into what is executive functioning. And I think this is really important for us, particularly of teenagers, because most teenagers, whether they're neurotypical or not, struggle with executive functioning. That's where the brain organizes all the different inhibitions and organizational tools that we use to keep our lives in order. And our teens are often a little bit more scattered. So our kids with autism often struggle with executive functioning. And this article kind of goes in and talks about thinking of your brain as an orchestra, executive functioning as a conductor, making sure all the parts are working together and working properly. And so there are a lot of strategies and techniques that we can do to help, and strategies to help our kids with those organizational skills. And so this article is really great and goes into some of the details about that. It talks about facing the demands of high school. And we know that with all the changing classes and now it's a particular challenge because of with COVID, and then now our kids are going to be going back to school. So our kids right now are really, really needing a lot more support. And this article does talk a little bit more about that. It then talks about preparing for puberty. And I just shared some of the things about puberty with you, and it has some resource books that are really good. And then grooming and personal hygiene, which we just talked about. Finding a place in the social world. We will be talking about that more in this training. You know, statistics like more than 40% of the teens with autism never saw friends outside of school. Half were never invited to take part in activities. For 54%, friends never called. And so, you know, these are social concerns that we have for our students with autism, and trying to keep them involved in social groups is very important. And like I said, we're just kind of scanning this right now. We will go more into it. But additional resources they give at the end of all their articles. And so then they have another article, Coming of Age, Autism and the Transition to Adulthood. And so they have a whole autism, adults with autism section as well, which goes into transitional daily living, college experiences. And you could see, just I could spend a whole hour just on this article and all these different resources through this organization. And so I just wanted to familiarize you with it and let you know that it is a wonderful resource. And we may go back to some of these if we have time. Typically, I do a lot of these trainings in 2 hours. So in an hour, I really am just kind of scanning what I think is important. This is another great resource for you as parents. Many of you, if you've been down this road with your kids for a long time, may be familiar with Michelle Garcia Winter and Social Thinking. They have amazingly good books for teens with social struggles. She also offers on her website tons of webinars that are free, blogs, articles as well. Not that we all have endless time to research all these things, but you can at least go to these sites that I've picked out for you, because I think they have some of the best stuff. If you go to the link that I included in the slide, that takes you straight to the web page where it has all the resources and books for teens. And it has, this one's about cognitive therapy for teens. Of course, this is a bundle where you could have more books than you'd probably ever have time to read, but they do a very nice job of explaining what the books are and what they help with. Some are geared toward teachers, perhaps like this social thinking think sheets, but they're still really great for parents too. You can, if your child is struggling with a particular social situation, you can find think sheets that kind of walk you through the process with them to help them kind of make sense of and understand the social world better. This is the Think Confident, Be Confident workbook for teens. Socially Curious and Curiously Social has been around for a long time. It's really great if your teen is a good reader. It kind of has it in the comic kind of format, and it really helps with them understanding more about the social world. I have a little story about that. I worked with a young girl in high school, very, very intelligent, but very considerably impacted by autism, and also very self-conscious about it. And I would meet with her sometimes for social group, but sometimes she wouldn't show up. And so one day I brought this book and I said, you know, I think this might be an enjoyable book for you to read and help you help you understand the social world better here at your high school. And she kind of looked at me and was like, oh, right, I'm not going to read this. And then before I knew it, she scooped it up, stuck it under her jacket, and walked out of the room. And I thought, well, that's the last I'll see of that book, perhaps. But wonderfully, we did come together several times after that, and we would take walks, and she would talk to me a lot about the kinds of things that were in this book and things that she was curious about. And it really was just kind of broke the ice and for us in being able to talk about these social things, and really helped her have like a concrete tool for her to refer to, and then something to discuss with me. So, you can use these books as a great way to open up conversations with your kids. Of course, we all want our kids to read this one, How Rude, The Teen Guide to Good Manners, Proper Behavior, and Not Grossing People Out. It's a great book. So not all these books are written by Michelle Garcia Winner. This one happens to be the Socially Curious. The ones that are not written by her, like this from Alex Packer, who's a PhD psychologist, Michelle Garcia Winner kind of handpicks the books that she sells on her social thinking website, so you know that they've kind of been reviewed by her. This is another social thinking manga style social map, and kids really like this one a lot too, if they're really into Japanese anime particularly, on helping understand the social world. This is a game. And so those are the main ones that are just focused on teens, but they're all, I must say, I've not read every single one of those, but I have a lot of them and they're actually very, very good. These next slides are information from the Center on Secondary Education for Students with Autism Spectrum Disorder. It's very research-based from the University of Carolina, and they have some great tools on their site. So if you ever, particularly for higher functioning kids, you can go straight to their website and get some really good handouts, like 2 or 3 page tip sheets on how to work on some of these skills. One area they have is supporting communication and social skills. And they talk about that kids in high school typically struggle with comprehension, expressive communication, and interacting with others. And this comprehension piece is pretty huge because a lot of our kids with autism really struggle in language arts classes because they are needing to take off on the perspective of what the author's trying to convey. They need to take the perspective of characters. There's a lot of writing between the lines in more high school literature. So trying to comprehend that level of literature can be really tough for our kids with autism. I'm not going to read each and every single one of these. I just kind of want to show you what they go into more depth, like under comprehension, understanding verbal and nonverbal communication. They discuss the speed of processing language, non-literal language, inferences, vocabulary, point of view. These are all the areas that you may recognize that your kiddos struggle with in some of these areas. And then potential areas of difficulty can be sentence formulation, vocabulary, stereotype speech, and nonverbal communication. These are the areas that they pinpointed. And I'm going through these quickly because I think it's more important that we talk about maybe the strategies that go along with these, because most of you probably already know what struggles that your particular child has around communication. Some kids have trouble initiating interactions, keeping that conversation, that reciprocity going. Maintaining topic is difficult, reading nonverbal cues, and perspective taking. So those are all super common areas that our kids struggle with. And so there's a million things that we could talk about as strategies, but I think what's most important is just to focus on a few at a time. I do like this cartoon. It says the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And sometimes our kiddos think that they're in a conversation or communication when in fact, perhaps they're not. They're just sharing their own interest or not knowing how to end a conversation. So things that we can do, little points to remember when we're trying to support communication in our teens with autism, is to allow extra processing time. So that's one of the hardest things for us to do. As parents, as teachers, as staff, as a staff member, is to slow down and to support and to simplify. Oftentimes we don't pause long enough in conversations to wait for a response. A lot of kids with autism struggle with auditory processing delays. And so we're asking them questions, or we're trying to have a conversation, and we move on to the next thing before we've allowed that to really sink into their brains and have time to respond to us. And then every time we start speaking again, they have to reset their brain to kind of formulate all over again what you were trying to say. So it's almost like a reset every time we start talking. So they might be just about to answer, then they have to reset. And so sometimes we think kids aren't responding to us on to be defiant, or they're doing it on purpose. And sometimes we really just need to wait. And every student or child with autism is different, but I've learned when I work with kids with autism, particularly with high school kids, when you're talking about sensitive topics, that waiting in almost an uncomfortably long time for them to respond, I typically get a response. And the longer I wait, sometimes the better response I get. And so sometimes we can teach kids skills like saying, if they need to pause and think for a while because they're having a hard time formulating their answer, we can teach them catchphrases like, I'm thinking right now, I'll let you know soon, or give me a minute, or little cues that they can learn how to say to people so that people know that they heard the question for one thing, and that they're going to respond, but they just need more time. Modeling for us to demonstrate and identify appropriate use of communication and social skills. I think that's a tough one, especially when we get frustrated as parents or teachers, to kind of try to stay in a calm mode, calm voice and neutral voice, and to really kind of teach those social skills and those communication skills instead of showing frustration ourselves, because that raises the blood pressure in our kids, and then that breaks down communication in itself. Social connections. We really need to facilitate our kids connecting with peers. So I'm going to tell you another quick story. I had a social group in a high school, and I had two young men. One was a junior and one was a senior. Both were considerably high functioning. One kiddo had been pretty impacted when he was younger, but he had just made so much growth and was doing so well. And the other student had always been incredibly high functioning. And I, for some reason, it just ended up being the two of them in the group that day. And I said, so they started talking about the movie Ralph. That was a couple years back, and how they wanted to go see this movie, and they both wanted to go see it. And I'm like, okay, you both want to see the movie, so why don't you go see it together? Wouldn't that be fun? And they literally did not know how to contact each other, because one said, well, I don't have his phone number. And I said, well, how would you get his phone number? And the other student said, well, I don't have a cell phone. And I'm like, okay, but do you have a landline? And most people have a phone in their house. And so we broke it down. And in the end, it took us probably 30 minutes or more to break down how they could connect and go to a movie together. And in the end, they did. So it was a great celebration. But I was a bit shocked and taken back myself that they didn't have those skills that most of us would assume they have. And how do you, like, hey, let's do something together. Let's make this happen. Oh, I don't have a cell phone. Oh, but I have a landline. Oh, I don't drive. Well, my sister does. All those kinds of pieces that they had to put together in order to make this one outing work. So it's good not to assume that our kids know more than we think they do. So an important reminder is to provide specific, positive, and constructive feedback as well. And, you know, like, celebrate those moments. I was so excited when those two guys finally figured out how to go to the movie and actually went. And we spent the whole next session talking about the movie. So we really do need to give very positive and constructive feedback. Other ways, like, really just say, like, if your child often has a difficult time having a reciprocal conversation with you, you know, back and forth, and for some reason one day it's a really nice flow and they're going back and forth in conversation, stop and point that out. Hey, did you notice how many times we went back and forth in this conversation, and I got to say something and then you got to say something, and that felt really great to me? And so really kind of pointing out those things that we made often choose not to point out because we think we take those things for granted. And it's really important to acknowledge those little growth spurts that some of our kids will have. The next area and they have a lot more information in this website, the Center on Secondary Education. Another area that I thought I'd touch on is supporting independence in behavior, because that's so important for our teens to have independence. And one of the ways, one of the topics under that heading is internet safety for teens with ASD. And you probably all have already faced this, and you probably have some of your own strategies, but I want to talk about this a little bit because we do live in a digital world where communication via the internet is the norm. And ironically, this was written or on this webpage way before COVID. So now that it's especially true. A lot of our kids make friends and maintain friendships virtually, like on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. It's accessible for adolescents with autism to build and maintain social relationships, as well as learn new things and explore their interests. And while there are many benefits to using the internet, there are also risks. And with easy access to the internet, teens with autism must learn about these risks and how to protect themselves. And I think probably all of you in this day and age already talked to your kids about this, but let's just kind of see what some of their suggestions were. I mean, in the last year, this is the only way our kids have been able to be social. And to be perfectly honest, I think some of our kids with autism have done really well during this COVID time because they have more access to social groups or through schools or internet opportunities, because that's what they're doing in Zoom classrooms. And so I've seen kids, because I pop in and out of Zoom classes to do observations, that they're actually taking more risk and sharing their thoughts more because it's not confrontive to them because they're on cameras. And eventually we want them to be social in public, but it's a great learning process for them. I've actually seen some positive results. And so back to what are the risks? Well, we know what the risks are. A lot of names can be thrown out by other students or other kids. But again, now it's better because most of our classrooms are run with supervisors and teachers. And so those opportunities for some of that bullying gets quelched right away, but not necessarily if your kids are doing this on their own time. So we know our kids fixate on games and social networking sites as well, because kids with autism are vulnerable to becoming compulsive internet users. So they might struggle to shift from a fantasy gaming world to day activities, and it can also limit in-person interactions. So ideas related to limiting obsessive technology use is to set clear limits on internet use and use a timer for the teen to indicate when use is finished. Software timers can also be used to limit access to certain websites to specific hours. But I think most of our teens get pretty angry if their computers shut down on a timer and they're not in control of it. But if we, have a timer and we set it for especially for gaming time, and when the timer goes up, it's off, or, they lose the privilege of maybe going on it again later in the day. And then for some of our kids that have less social awareness, encouraging technology or computer use in the same room with an adult can be really important. So, we know kids can get into images of violence, pornography, and death fairly easily these days. And so we really want to protect our kids. And so it's important to help adolescents with autism surf safely on the net. So having discussions about the danger and consequences of visiting inappropriate websites. And this is true for all levels of functionality. Sometimes our kids just need to be reminded, and teach the teen about images or content that could be considered criminal, and encourage the teen to tell an adult if encouraged to access this content by another. Carrie Dunn Burn has a great book. It's called 5 is Against the Law. And so we kind of teach kids through the 5-point scale, things that, maybe when you're younger and you innocently stumble on, but as you get older, if you're actually going to certain sites, that is a criminal charge. And I think some of our kids don't realize that. So really teaching them about the law and what is, what's okay and what's not okay for them to access. For some of our kids that don't have that discernment, you can install a pop-up blocker or other software program to block content and monitor content access. And then the site talks about predators, and we know that there's a lot of predators in the gaming world. Not to be so negative about all this, but we're trying to build awareness with our kids. We don't want to make them fearful, but we do want to have those conversations. So having a checklist, I mean, I would actually do a visual if my kid were fairly impacted by autism, giving the teen a visual checklist of information that he should not be giving out online for safety reasons. Like you could have, a big circle, red circle with the line through it, and it lists birth date, social security number, address, school name. Careful of the photos they print. Another quick little story. I mean, my son, who's actually neurotypical, but and a pretty smart kiddo, and even he fumbled and found my college ID, and he was trying to show his friend, hey, look at my mom in college, kind of thing. But back in my day, your social security number was on your school ID, and he had put on Instagram or Facebook my school ID with my social security number, and it just so happened that I had one of those sites open, and I panicked and I immediately called him, and he got it off within probably 3 minutes. Had I not been in one of those sites, I don't know what would have happened, and that was completely innocent. But that's kind of why we need to really talk to our teens about, look at what you're posting, look what's on it. And then if you're unsure, check with an adult about whether or not you should be posting something. For instance, I did encourage him, if you're going to post a picture of me, could you maybe run it by me first? And so cyberbullying happens actually more than we'd like to admit. And we know that cyberbullying is the harassment of others using the internet. And individuals with autism are often easy targets because they can miss social cues and not realize they are being bullied. Or if they do, they may lack the skills to stand up for themselves or to communicate with others about what is going on. And that can lead, to anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. We have to really be careful of bullying in our schools and cyberbullying, particularly now when schools haven't been in session. So again, discussing what bullying looks like, so a teen knows how to identify it, name calling and threatening images, teaching our kids how to block friends on social networking sites so they know how to get rid of a bully, encourage teens to seek out a responsible adult to help them handle the situation. And then teens with ASD can also engage in cyberbullying without even understanding the consequences of their actions. Maybe they've been cyberbullied, so they want to turn the tables. So it's really important, again, for us to teach these kiddos to understand how serious some of this stuff is and how it can, again, when you're in 5th grade and you accidentally do something and it's your learning curve for you, it might get excused, but you do that same thing when you're a 10th grader and you can have charges against you. So it's these social nuances that kind of scare me more than kids that are more impacted by autism, because we give kids that are more impacted maybe very simple black and white rules. You do this, you can't do this, you can do this. And often those kids will follow those rules, but the kids that are higher functioning, who have a little bit more freedom sometimes, especially on the internet, they don't always understand those social nuances, and we can't take it for granted that they do. So it's highly important to have those conversations, or you can find social stories online about cyberbullying. You can read social stories to your to your child. You can put visual cues around the room where the computer is. And this is one of those visual things I would print out and have in a computer room if I had a student or a child with autism. It's to teach teens about internet safety, and it's got an acronym, and it's called Play It Safe. So you could create a visual on your wall, down the wall, you know, Play It Safe. And I'm going to go through what each of those letters of the acronym stand for. So P is for personal information. Don't share it. Never give out your full name, where you live, or where you go to school. L is let a trusted adult know. Tell someone if anyone asks you for your personal information. A is for attachments. Be aware before opening any attachments. Y is your feelings are important. If something happens that makes you uncomfortable, tell an adult right away. For it is I is information. Remember that not everything you see online is true. If you are unsure, ask a trusted adult. And T, take breaks from the computer. It is important to take breaks so that you don't strain your eyes, and so you also have a chance to talk to other people and do other things. Set a timer to ensure you are not on the internet too long. And that's a really important one too, because our kids can just get sensory overload. So if you do a visual schedule for your child, you can insert breaks, you know, like every 45, 50 minutes for them, or 30 minutes to walk away. Set a timer for 10 minutes, get a drink of water, walk around the house. Taking that break is very important. Safe, S is spending money online. Don't buy things without permission. Money should only be spent by a trusted adult. I have another story about that. I like to tell stories during my training so that you can kind of get a little insight into some of the things these kiddos will do, even kids that we think are high functioning. This young woman was on the spectrum and somewhat impacted, but pretty high functioning as far as academics go, but trying to understand the social world. At night, one night, her mom was asleep, and they have those children that you can adopt on TV, and they do the really sad stories. And I'm not saying that they're not true and that it isn't a good organization, but this young woman who, number one, struggled to understand emotions and struggled to understand social nuances, and they're talking about how these kids are all starting. I mean, she took her mom's credit card, and I don't know how many kids she adopted before the credit card overloaded, but fortunately her parent was able to contact the company, and her mom had a very nice compromise. She let this young woman adopt one of the kids that they put the picture on the fridge and that they would send money to. And then this young woman created a pen pal with her. So it became a positive thing, but in the beginning it was pretty outrageous. So the A of Play It Safe is to act politely. Don't say anything online that you would not say to someone in person. F, friends online should stay online. If someone asks to meet you, tell them no, and always let an adult know. And E, enjoy yourself, play safe, and have fun. So I just think for your readers, your kids that are readers, this is a really nice visual to just put down the wall of a computer room for kids of all levels of function. So we've talked a lot about this, internet safety. So other suggestions for parents and school staff, and I already mentioned some of these, is to create visual supports with the safety tips. Role playing, kids with autism like to role play, most of them. Maybe your family sits around and you do some role playing about internet safety, and you could play the game Safe or Not Safe, and you can create games around it to give them that social awareness of what is safe and what is not safe. And then again, I did mention social narratives, scripts, or social stories. There you can write your own, or there's a lot on the internet already that you can just Google and find to read social stories at your child's level that can describe internet safety. And at the end of this, I have some resources for you on when you get the handout of this PowerPoint. And so there's Safe Surfing Kids, there's lesson plans, there's some resources here, social safety. So I have a list of of some resources for you to go further with this. So the next area that I think is important to discuss when we're talking about our kids with autism is building healthy eating habits for adolescents with autism. I mean, the majority of kids with autism I know have fairly selective diets. And then you add teenage years onto that where their taste buds are changing and they're sensitive to certain things. And trying to get our kids to eat healthy diets can be extremely cumbersome. And there's some, again, from this site, from the University of North Carolina, there's supporting independence around food. And it talks about, you know, picky eaters. I'm sure I don't need to tell you what picky eaters are. You probably all live that one. And being overweight, there's a lot of obesity that's common with kids with autism, especially as they move through adolescence and adulthood, especially those kids that get hooked into computers and don't want to leave the computer for breaks. And then we know that excess weight can also lead to other health problems. So, and most of you have already been down this road. These are just kind of reminders. Consult your physician, speech or occupational therapist with feeding expertise. Encourage your team to explore the food. And so trying to be patient, but involving your kids in the cooking process is a huge one. I have learned with kids with autism. A lot of kids with autism end up loving to cook, and they really expand their palates and their tastes by cooking foods and exploring and tasting them. And they have a little bit more control, and it's a creative process. So I think it's a really awesome way to expand our kids' palates with autism. Avoid using food as a reward. I think sometimes when our kids are really little and we're trying to get those primitive rewards going for them and language from them, sometimes we revert to fishy crackers and things like that. And that's okay in the beginning, but by the time kids are adolescents, we really want to phase out those reinforcers, those food reinforcers, especially like using desserts and treats as a reward for eating vegetables, because that's not teaching them the importance of eating balanced foods. And it's making them feel like the best foods are the desserts and treats. And then here's the one I talked a lot about already. Encourage your teen to help with meal preparation. A lot of kiddos on the spectrum really get into the TV shows, the cooking shows, you know, and watching that with your kids and then picking a menu item that you create together is a great way for them to learn about healthier food habits. And then introduce only one new food at a time, along with maybe a favorite food. So some of these I'm sure you've tried. Aim to create a rainbow in your plate. In other words, create a meal that includes fruits, vegetables, and a variety of colors. We have some kids with autism that will only eat white foods on some days and green foods on some days, but trying to mix up those colors and get more produce on the plate helps with nutrition. And besides, this one goes along with having your kids prepare a meal. You know, if you guys watch a TV show, a cooking show, and you pick something you're going to make, get them involved with determining the food shopping list. Maybe if they can tolerate it, take them shopping with you and have them just be part of the process from the very beginning. Also teaches independence for them if they're going to be an independent liver, someone that lives on their own or lives in a supported living, but they, you know, have their own apartment and cook their own meals, to get them started as young as possible. Offering choices, learning appropriate serving sizes, incorporating whole foods in meal times and snack times. I think we all have seen so much information and read so much about all of these, particularly the importance of whole foods versus foods with additives, particularly for our kids with autism and ADHD are very, very sensitive to sugar and additives. And then, you know, again, and very important, offering choices, because teens like to be in control of what they do. They don't want to be treated like little kids, but maybe they get choices of a few things that are already healthy. Having regularly scheduled family meal times, serve your meals and courses beginning with vegetables, and modeling good eating habits. These are all important. But there are some sites that you can go to. So if your kid likes to explore websites with you or on their own, these are some really good websites. This one's called The Healthy Eating Plate, and it's a guide for creating healthy, balanced meals. It's out of Harvard, and it has a lot of visuals. It's a nice site. Let's see if it opens up here. So it's called The Healthy Eating Plate, and it has a lot of articles and places and things kids can explore about whole grains, proteins, fats and cholesterols, healthy drinks. And some kids really get into this once they start looking at it, and it even has recipes and things like that. And so it's kind of a fun way for them to have a visual on the computer of ways to read or for you to explore it with them on the internet, so that they can hopefully pay more attention because they like things that are virtual versus maybe in a book or us just telling them. At least they have that visual support. Here's another one called Choose My Plate. It's kind of similar to the other one. And then there's this, Take Charge of Your Health, a guide for teenagers. It's a printable online booklet that offers teens information about healthy living. And it talks about how teens can increase physical activities, how to read food levels, and how to make healthy food choices. It's a fun one too. So those are three nice resources you can explore with your kids to try to get them more interested in healthy eating. And then I like to end that section with this Calvin and Hobbes joke, or comic, I should say. It says, "What is this? It looks gross." And the mom says, "It's a vegetarian meal. It's good for you." And he's like, "Vegetarian? Yuck, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm a dessertarian." So I mean, that is most of our kids. So got to work hard, get them to eat healthy. This next section is about supporting physical and emotional wellness. And this part, that again, these resources are all available to you through that secondary education website. And again, they do have like 2 or 3 page handouts you can read instead of going into, if you don't want too much detail. But it does talk about sleep, and about 80% of children and teens with autism spectrum disorder have experienced some level of sleep problems, some more than others, but a lot of, especially our teens with autism, are nocturnal. And it can be a real challenge because we need our sleep. So we go to sleep and then they wake up and they're up playing video games all night. So this section goes into determine if there are unaddressed medical issues, keep a sleep diary. This is particularly helpful if you're going to consult a physician to talk about the time your kid goes to bed and wakes up, the total amount of hours they sleep, and in order to have effective strategies. You know, just explaining again the importance of sleep. We tell our kids that, but maybe exploring some statistics. Our kids like facts on why it's important to sleep. Some teens don't understand how it really impacts their growth and well-being. So it's again, education is key. And this little kiddo, you can just see in her face, sometimes I just stare at the ceiling when I can't sleep. It doesn't help. And it's frustrating for our kids too. So the things that they suggest, and I'm just going to read the headlines of these. Establishing a bedtime routine, even for our teens, it's important to try to establish a routine. Create a comfortable sleep environment, you know, so it's dark and quiet and not too hot. You know, keeping the room, they say keeping the room at a really cool temperature. They say just below 70 degrees. I think 65 is even better for our kids. And keeping possible distractors, remove them at bedtime, such as televisions, video games, computers, phones, so they don't get tempted to use those items rather than going to sleep. It's just not in their control to have a TV in their bedroom staring right at them and they can't sleep. So the first thing I want to do is turn on the TV, and that's the very thing that's going to keep them awake. Ensure diet and healthy exercise habits are supportive of sleep. We kind of all know these things. Avoiding caffeine and sugary drinks in the evening. So it's harder to control our teens than it is our little ones, but it's still important to try. Having a visual of a bedtime routine checklist that looks something like this, even for our high functioning kids. You know, there's pajama time, there's teeth time, getting your clothes ready for school. That's when we went to school. Organizing, you know, backpack, hand important papers to adult, pick out, you know, whatever it is that you want to put here. And if your student does that, you know, in the 5 nights in a row for a special treat, maybe on Friday night, they get to pick dinner, pizza, and a movie or something as a reward for having followed their bedtime routine schedule. Maybe they need, you know, to be rewarded more frequently than that. But for our older kids, it'd be nice if they, you know, at least 4 out of 5 nights were able to really follow their bedtime routine, and then they were able to have a reward at the end of the week. There is Autism Speaks have these toolkits that are wonderful resources if you're not familiar with them. This is called this one is particularly Autism Speaks Sleep Tool for Teens. They're really great resource. They offer, I'm going to pull this up for you just so you can kind of see. Oh, I don't think it's what it's trying to open it. It may not open it. You can sign up for these free toolkits, and there are multiple pages. And if you don't want to print it, Autism Speaks will, oh, here it is. Autism Speaks will send it to you for free. And it goes through a lot of strategies for you. It's based on research. And again, it pretty much talks about things I just talked about: regular schedule, the physical space, the physical exercising that's important. And just kind of quick tips. You can put these up in the wall. Talks again about good food habits before going to bed, having evening routines. So it kind of goes through similar things that I talked about it, but it's a nice handout booklet that they have, and it's not too long, that you could keep or go through with your teen for them to be reminded, whoops, sorry here, of, one second here, let me get back into my slideshow here. Okay. Here we go. This is a really wonderful book. It's sort of written for teachers, but it's really valuable for parents too. I had a parent of a 21-year-old young man who actually had a job in a grocery store stacking groceries. And, you know, the girls that worked there were really nice to him, and he misinterpreted it that they wanted to be his girlfriend. It created a lot of issues. And this is a very, very, very frank and research on sexuality. And it uses a lot of evidence-based practices. And it has lessons and handouts and things and ways to talk to your kids. It is a really good book about intimate relationships and sexual health for teens. That book can be found at the aapcpublishing.net, that website I have up there. They also have lots of books about teens that are really good for in autism. And then we don't have a lot of time. Like I said, each one of these topics I've talked about, I could do a whole training on, but you know where to go to find more. And the information on these next slides is about supporting transition to adulthood, which is a big topic. And maybe we'll just do a separate training on this soon. But in this secondary website that I showed you, they do talk about supporting success and safety in relationships, identifying the purpose of dating, explaining dating to our autistic teens, establish a shared understanding of the dating process, the differences between acquaintances, friendships, and dating. And it really kind of is important for us to go through those topics with our kids, because again, it's those social nuances that our kids may not understand. Demonstrate dating readiness. Like, in other words, well, you're not taking showers and you're not washing your hair and your armpits. And so I'm not really sure you're ready to date, because that's not usually attractive to the person that you might be wanting to ask out. And be aware of and develop a plan for dealing with sensory sensitivities. A slide I don't have in here because they didn't have it on theirs, because this is kind of following their guideline, is talking about identification with gender. A lot of our kids are gender fluent and that are on the spectrum in high school. In other words, they're exploring their gender preference and identifying as trans or trying that on. It happens more frequently than you would think with our autistic teens, because it's just trying to make sense of that social world. And we really need to support them with whatever it is that they're trying to learn about and explore, and at least educate them about it, because it is a time when there's a lot of gender confusion for them. We want kids to identify abusive behavior and illegal sexual behaviors and how to avoid them, discuss relationship dangers faced on the internet and the consequences of sexual activity, demonstrate perspective taking and some social communication skills for dating, identify social mistakes related to dating. These are all, like I said, this is a whole like long training. But again, if you go to this website, it gives you some strategies here and some quick ones about using visual supports. Again, always visual supports are helpful to teach targeted skills. Using photos to provide practice in identifying people's emotions, using visual scripts to rehearse key dating concepts like asking someone on a date. Video models are great. Video examples to reinforce social skill development, such as correct body language use in initiating conversations or flirting. There's a lot of YouTube, which you have to screen, teaching tools on dating for kids with autism. And if you don't want to go and do all the research, a great way to do is just watch movies with your kids. And if there's a scene where there's a couple that are going to go on a date, you kind of stop. First of all, you watch the movie with your kiddo or let them watch it. And then you say, we're going to watch this movie now and we're going to stop it a lot. We're going to talk about some of these things and it'll be fun. This is how we're going to do it. You don't just stop it when they're watching it, because then they're going to get frustrated and mad that you stopped the movie. But they've already seen it, and then you're going to go back and watch it with them and talk about some of those scenes in that movie to help teach like social appropriateness for dating or hugging or things like that. It's a great way to teach kids those social nuances about dating and relationships. Social stories are fabulous. Right here, I have a great website. They have a bunch of social stories for teens and on dating and things like that as well. So you can go to that website. They're called the WatsonInstitute.org. It's an institute on the East Coast, and they have a lot of resources on that site with social stories that are already made up for you. Again, role playing can be really fun to talk about analyzing social situations. And then don't forget to reinforce correct behaviors and checking in regularly with teens on the spectrum and the people that support them. checking in with the case managers at school when they're back in school, or counselors, to see how things are going. There was a great video clip that I use in my longer trainings of Max, the kiddo that had high functioning autism on that TV series called Parenthood. And he told his parents, he just nonchalantly said, well, he had a date, or he knew this girl was going to want to go out with him, and his parents had asked why. And he said, well, she likes dinosaurs and I like dinosaurs, or something like that. And it's like, for him, that was enough. If we both like the same things, and clearly we're made to date each other. And there's a lot more to it than that, we know, but for him, that was what he was thinking. So research indicates that positive and responsive relationships between parent, caregivers, and their children can influence development. Parental expectations and involvement in their child's education can impact achievement and post-secondary success. So I think parents underestimate their influence sometimes by the time their kids are teens, but research does actually indicate that if you create positive and responsive relationships, you talk about these things with your kids, that it really will influence their development and help them be more successful adults in the world. I've already gone over my time, but just to wrap up, there's Transition Toolkit, another toolkit from Autism Speaks, which has all kinds of tools and helpful strategies as your student transitions, maybe from high school age into the adult world. Autism Society has a wonderful resource called Autism Through the Lifespan. If you go on that link that I have right there, it has resource after resource about autism through birth through old age. And there is a place on that original site I was talking about, the Center for Secondary Education, on guardianship. And they have a really nice handout on that website. I'm showing it to you right now. It's just 2 pages long, but it's some really nice tip on guardianship and things that you should consider. Unlimited guardianship, conservatorship, alternatives to guardianship. So it really talks about just a nice 2-page handout about if you need to go down that road. And oh, my PowerPoint just crashed again, sorry. So I think that what we are doing right now is going to go into Q&A, and I'll just put this last slide up if it shows up as we go into Q&A. And thank you for your time. I know I went through a lot of information, but I like to give you all the resources so that you can continue to explore what it is that interests you from tonight's topic, and then have reliable places to go explore what you want to learn more about. This was just my last slides. Teens gotta love them.
Rowan, thank you so much. Again, this is Janet, and I'm the host this evening from the Swindells Resource Center. And I want to say thank you very much to Rowan for sharing all this really great information. I wanted to let you know as well, this event will be recorded and available on our website in a couple of weeks, as well as those who have joined us tonight will receive a copy of tonight's presentation along with some additional resources and in the post-event email. So be on the lookout for that within the next 24 hours.